Dear friends, they say a bigger boat faces bigger waves. But some boats, no matter how glamorous and splendid they appear on the surface, are built on a rotten foundation of lies and betrayal. It only takes a gentle breeze of truth to capsize and sink them in an instant. My husband, he was once the captain of such a ship. He stood arrogantly on deck, basking in the limelight, completely unaware that the one who truly held the helm, the one who decided whether that ship sailed or stayed, was me, the wife he was callously plotting to discard. And then, with a single phone call, a cruel command born from the pinnacle of his hubris, he single-handedly sank his own vessel. The Mediterranean sky was a flawless, cloudless blue, the golden sun pouring honey onto the azure sea. Aboard the magnificent yacht, the Titan, the gentle melody of lounge music mingled with the soft lapping of waves, creating a symphony of luxury and indulgence. In the midst of this idyllic scene, my husband Michael was lounging on a sun chair, a glass of premium champagne in hand, his eyes half closed in blissful satisfaction. At 35, he had everything a man could desire. A soaring career as the CEO of a rising corporation, money, fame, and, at his side, a stunning beauty. Jessica, a young model with a sultry figure and a charming face, was clad in a tiny bikini, gently rubbing scented oil onto his sun-kissed back. "Michael, darling, doesn't my massage feel good?" she cooed, her voice sweet and cloying. "Amazing, my love," Michael purred, pulling her into his arms and planting a soft kiss on her full lips. He felt like a king, an Olympian god reveling in life at the summit. He had completely forgotten my existence. Amelia, the dutiful wife at home, the one he often criticized as dull and incapable of enjoying the finer things in life. He had deceived me, claiming this was a crucial business trip to Europe. In reality, he was savoring a lavish vacation with his mistress, a vacation paid for with the very money I had indirectly earned. "So, Michael," Jessica began, batting her eyelashes, "when will things be over between you and your wife? I don't want to be the other woman hiding in the shadows forever." Michael let out a theatrical, weary sigh. "Soon, my love. I've had enough. When I get back from this trip, I'll end it for good. She's not worthy of you anymore," he said, his tone dripping with contempt. "A woman who only putters around the kitchen, with no ambition, no career. How can she possibly walk alongside a man like me?" He spoke as if our marriage was a burden, a disgrace to his elevated status. He had utterly forgotten that without my kitchen, without my silent sacrifices, he would still be a man struggling on the verge of bankruptcy. "But will she agree to a divorce? I hear she loves you very much," Jessica feigned concern. Michael scoffed, a smile full of cruel confidence. "Love? She's clinging to me for my money, but she has no choice. All the assets, the house, the cars, everything is in my name. She has nothing. All I have to do is freeze her bank accounts, cut off all her funds, and she'll have to meekly sign the divorce papers and leave with nothing but the clothes on her back," he said, as if outlining a brilliant, strategic plan. He wanted to push me into a corner, to show me who truly held the power. He wanted me on my knees, begging. "Then do it now," Jessica urged, her eyes gleaming with triumph. "I can't wait any longer." "All right, anything for you," Michael smirked, feeling ever so gallant. He reached for the satellite phone on the table, an expensive gadget ensuring he could manage his affairs from anywhere in the world. He dialed a familiar number, that of David, his most trusted assistant, who had been with him since his startup days. He put the phone on speaker so Jessica could hear his commanding voice loud and clear. "Hello, David." "Yes, sir, I'm here." David's voice on the other end was calm and professional as always. "Where are you? Are you busy?" Michael asked, his tone relaxed, that of a magnate in control. "I'm at the office, sir. What are your instructions?" "Good. Listen carefully." Michael cleared his throat, glanced at Jessica, and then spoke with crisp, deliberate finality. "Contact the bank immediately. I want you to cancel all credit and debit cards in my wife Amelia's name. Freeze all of her accounts. From this moment on, I don't want her to be able to spend a single dollar of my money. Do you understand? I'm about to divorce her. There's no reason to keep supporting a useless person." He uttered those words with casual cruelty. He awaited the swift, obedient, "Yes, sir," from his loyal assistant. He pictured the scene: Amelia, his wife, panicking when she discovered she was penniless. A wave of indescribable satisfaction washed over him. But the response was not obedience. On the other end of the line, there was a prolonged, unnerving silence. Michael started to feel irritated. "David, did you hear me? Why aren't you answering?" Then David's voice returned, but it was completely different. The deference, the subservience, was gone. It was cold, flat, and carried a chilling distance. "Sir, I heard every single word." "Then do it." "What are you waiting for?" Michael snapped. "I'm very sorry, sir," David said, and for the first time in 5 years of working for him, he dared to use the words, "very sorry." "I cannot execute this order, because I do not have the authority." "No authority? What nonsense are you talking about? You're my assistant. I pay your salary." Michael began to rage. "That is correct, sir. You pay my salary." David's tone remained unchanged. "But the person who truly pays both your salary and mine is not you." Michael was stunned. What did you just say?" "And, sir," David delivered the final blow, his voice as cold as ice, as sharp as a scalpel, severing all of Michael's delusions. "While you were busy ordering me to cancel your wife's cards, I have some urgent news to report. 10 minutes ago, I received a direct order from Mrs. Amelia Thompson. She has instructed me, in my capacity as the managing director of the investment fund that capitalized your company, to withdraw the entire $150 million from all of the corporation's accounts. The order has been executed. The banks, partners, and shareholders have all been notified. To put it in the simplest terms, sir, your company is now bankrupt." The call ended. The expensive satellite phone slipped from Michael's hand, clattering onto the teak deck of the yacht. He stood frozen, surrounded by the blue sea and golden sun. The champagne on the table was still bubbling, but his world had come to a screeching halt. $150 million, an investment fund, Amelia, bankrupt. The words were like sea monsters, roaring and tearing his ship of ambition to shreds. Dear friends, a takedown could not be more spectacular. What was the secret behind the gentle homemaker, Amelia? And what would Michael face now, having fallen from heaven to hell in a single phone call? If you are also on the edge of your seat, please like, share, and subscribe to the Golden Hour Confessions channel so you don't miss the next dramatic chapter. The Mediterranean waves still lapped lazily against the yacht's hull. The sun still shone brilliantly, and the champagne still fizzed with tiny bubbles. The scene was unchanged, a perfect picture of opulent tranquility. But for Michael, the world had changed forever. He stood motionless as a statue, his eyes wide and vacant, staring into the void. The words of David, his once trusted assistant, echoed in his mind, sharp and merciless as a death sentence. "Your company is now bankrupt." Jessica, the young model, had lost her fawning demeanor. She looked at him in horror, slowly backing away as if he were carrying a contagious disease. The kingdom he had worked so hard to build, the illusion of power and wealth, it had all crumbled in a single phone call. But why? How could Amelia, his gentle, unassuming wife, possess such terrifying power? To understand, we must go back 7 years, to when the seeds of this tragedy were sown in what seemed like a fairy tale romance. 7 years ago, I was not an ordinary housewife. I was Amelia Thompson, the sole heiress of the Thompson family, one of the most established and wealthiest business dynasties in New York. The fortune my grandfather and father left behind was not just companies and skyscrapers, but a vast network of financial investments managed by a family trust worth billions of dollars. I grew up in the lap of luxury, coddled and given the finest education. I graduated with a degree in finance from Harvard, where I learned not only about numbers, but also about the power and responsibility that came with them. Upon returning to the States, I didn't directly manage the family businesses. I chose a different path, becoming a silent investor, a true shark in the corporate world. I used my intellect to make money grow, to expand the family's wealth. My life then was a whirlwind of first-class flights, private meetings with billionaires, and decisions that could alter the fate of entire companies. I had it all: power, money, admiration. Yet, deep down, I felt an emptiness. The men who approached me, who courted me, didn't see Amelia. They only saw the Thompson heiress. Their love was a calculation, a business deal. I longed for a true, simple love, where someone loved me for who I was, not for what I had. Then, during a charity event at a university, I met Michael. He was a final-year business administration student, a young man from a modest background but with eyes burning with ambition. He stood on stage, presenting his e-commerce startup project with a confidence and passion that was palpable. The project was raw, full of holes, but I saw potential in him, a powerful drive to succeed. After his presentation, I approached him, not as an investor, but as a friend. I lied. I told him I was just a regular office worker with an interest in startups. For once, I wanted to get to know a man without the colossal shadow of my family name looming over us. We started talking, then dating. He fell in love with me, an unremarkable office worker. He loved my intelligence, my sharpness. He said he always learned so much just by being with me. Our love wasn't about expensive gifts or fancy restaurants. It was about long nights spent analyzing business models, strolls through Central Park, sharing an ice cream cone, and talking about our dreams. For the first time in my life, I felt genuinely loved. I believed he was the man I had been searching for. 2 years later, we were married. I made a decision even bolder than my initial lie. I would continue to hide my identity. I wanted to single-handedly lift the man I loved to the pinnacle of success, to turn his ambitions into reality. I wanted to prove to the world and to my own family that our love was real, that my choice was right. But 3 years ago, a major crisis struck. Michael's small family textile company, a business passed down from his grandparents, was on the brink of bankruptcy due to poor management and market competition. His parents were devastated, and he was helpless. It was the first time I had ever seen him cry. Seeing the strong man I loved break down shattered my heart. I knew it was time for the silent benefactor to step in. I couldn't just give him money directly. That would wound his pride and expose my identity. I chose a more sophisticated approach. A perfect play was staged. I secretly used my trust fund through a subsidiary shell company established in Singapore, with no apparent links to the Thompson family, to acquire his family's company. In truth, it wasn't an acquisition. It was a rescue. I injected a massive sum of $150 million to clear all debts, modernize the entire production line, and expand its scale. I became the majority shareholder, holding 80% of the shares, but remained an anonymous one. All transactions were conducted through lawyers and intermediary firms. To Michael and his family, they only knew that their company had been saved by a mysterious benefactor, a foreign venture capital fund that had seen its potential. They were ecstatic. They saw it as a miracle, a blessing from above. They had no idea that their savior was the very wife and daughter-in-law who cooked and cleaned for them every day. I gave them an empire and continued to play the part of an ordinary person. I never imagined that my silent love and sacrifice were nurturing a monster of greed and betrayal. After that spectacular rescue, the family company, now renamed TG Group, was completely transformed. With abundant capital and the strategic direction I quietly mapped out, TG Group not only escaped bankruptcy but also grew at an explosive rate. Michael went from being the director of a failing company to the chairman of a rising conglomerate. He was handed a seat of power, presiding over an empire he hadn't shed a single drop of sweat to build. And it was from this point that the tragedy of our marriage began to sprout. Success that came too quickly and too easily changed Michael. He was no longer the ambitious young man who had stayed up all night with me analyzing business plans. He became arrogant. He genuinely believed that all this success was due to his innate talent, that fortune had simply smiled upon him. He started giving bombastic speeches to his employees, talking about vision and strategy, empty words he'd picked up from self-help books. He reveled in the praise and flattery of his subordinates. He gradually forgot who had given him everything. His transformation wasn't limited to his attitude. He plunged into a life of extravagant indulgence. He bought supercars, designer watches, and expensive suits. He threw lavish parties that lasted all night, mingling with the upper echelon. He wanted to prove his status, to erase his humble past, and in that glittering world, I, his housewife, suddenly became out of place and inadequate. He began to feel ashamed to be seen with me. He criticized my simple style of dress as provincial. He chided my dislike for noisy parties as a lack of social skills. He needed a different kind of woman. A trophy wife who could adorn his public image, who could shine alongside him at social events. And he found her. Jessica, a young model aspiring to enter high society. She was beautiful, articulate, and most importantly, she knew how to admire him blindly. She looked at him with worshipful eyes, always showering him with praise. It fed his ballooning ego. He began an open affair with Jessica. He took her on trips, bought her expensive gifts. He made no effort to hide it. In fact, he seemed proud, as if having a mistress was a symbol of his success. I knew everything, but I remained silent. I was hurt, disappointed, but I still tried to hold on. I deluded myself into thinking it was just a fleeting infatuation, that he would soon realize the value of his family. I tried to talk to him, but was met only with indifference and dismissive words. "Don't interfere in my personal life, Amelia. Your job is to stay home and take care of the family. I've given you a comfortable life. What more do you want?" He treated me like an object, a well-paid housekeeper, not a wife. My mother-in-law, Susan, had also completely changed since becoming the chairman's mother. She was no longer the gentle, down-to-earth woman I once knew. She became haughty and cruel. She looked down on me, criticizing me relentlessly. She believed I was a freeloader, unworthy of her brilliant son. She openly supported his relationship with Jessica. "My Michael is a dragon, a phoenix. He needs a goddess by his side, not a plain Jane like you," she once spat in my face. The final straw came one evening when I overheard a conversation between Michael and his mother in his study. The door was ajar, and I heard everything. "Mom, I'm sick of her." Michael's voice was full of frustration. "I want to divorce her and marry Jessica. Only Jessica is worthy of being my wife, of giving me beautiful, intelligent children." "I support you, son," Susan replied, her voice triumphant. "But we have to be smart about it. We have to find a way to kick her out with nothing. This mansion, she can't touch it. We'll say it was your premarital asset, that you earned it yourself. She contributed nothing, so she gets nothing." I stood outside the door, my hands clamped over my mouth to stifle a sob. So, they had a plan. They didn't just want to discard me. They wanted to rob me of the very house I had paid for but foolishly let him put in his name. The pain of betrayal, contempt, and their vicious scheming intertwined, squeezing my heart. In that moment, I understood. My love was dead. My sacrifices had been trampled upon. My patience had run its course. I didn't storm in and cause a scene. I just quietly returned to my room, tears streaming down my face. But these were no longer tears of weakness. They were tears of enlightenment. The play I had written was coming to an end, but the one who would decide its ending would not be them. It would be me. David's call was like an invisible torpedo, striking the magnificent Titan and sinking it to the seafloor of harsh reality. Michael stood frozen, the shattered phone at his feet. He could no longer hear the lapping waves, no longer feel the warmth of the sun. All around him was the black abyss of collapse. Bankrupt, $150 million. Amelia. The words repeated in his head like a malevolent curse. He couldn't believe it. How was it possible? Amelia, the housewife he had always looked down upon, was the owner of a colossal fortune, and David, his loyal assistant, was a wolf in sheep's clothing? His entire life, his entire career, turned out to be a sham, an elaborately staged play. "Michael? What's wrong? You're scaring me," Jessica, still stunned, shook his arm violently. "What do you mean, bankrupt? Tell me." Her panic snapped Michael back to reality. He looked at her, then out at the vast ocean, a feeling of utter helplessness and terror engulfing him. He tried to reassure himself. "No, it can't be. David's lying. He must have conspired with that damn wife of mine to trick me. I have to call the office." He scrambled for the yacht's onboard phone, his hands trembling as he dialed the vice president's number. The line just rang and rang. He called the CFO voicemail. He called the head of sales. The number was disconnected. He called everyone he considered an ally. No one answered. They were either truly unreachable or had received instructions to sever all contact with the former chairman. As Michael frantically made calls, a crew member approached, looking uncomfortable. "Sir, I've just been notified by the yacht charter company. Your credit card has been declined for the trip's expenses. They require immediate payment in cash. Otherwise, we will have to return to the nearest port." "What? Declined?" Michael roared. He pulled out his American Express Centurion card, the powerful black card with no preset spending limit, his pride and joy, and handed it to the crewman. "Try this card again. That's impossible." The crewman took the card, his expression even more pained. "Sir, this is the card we tried. The system says the account has been frozen." Frozen. The word was another hammer blow to his spinning head. He understood now. This was no joke. His order to cancel my cards had been pointless, but my order to withdraw the capital had been devastatingly effective. I hadn't just pulled the funds from the company. I had frozen his personal assets as well. The assets he thought were his were all tied to the company. Jessica, standing nearby, heard everything. Her face went from pale to a sickly green. "It's all gone? You're really bankrupt?" she shrieked, her voice devoid of its former sweetness, filled only with fury and disappointment. "You useless fraud. You lied to me. You said you were a corporate chairman, a tycoon. Turns out you're just a parasite living off your wife. You bastard." She lunged at him, clawing and hitting him like a madwoman. "Give me back my youth. Give me back all the expensive gifts. You've ruined my life." Michael, already in a state of panic and now under attack from his mistress, lost control. He shoved her away forcefully. "Get off me. You're just a gold digger. The money's gone, so get lost." Their brawl turned the luxurious yacht deck into a chaotic scene. The captain and security personnel had to intervene. Finally, with no other choice, the captain decided to return to the nearest port, Monaco. The dream vacation had ended in a nightmare of humiliation. Michael and Jessica were treated like criminals, kept under close watch in their cabin. He sat there, in the middle of the vast ocean, feeling more alone than a deserted island. He had lost everything, and he didn't even know how he was going to get home. Michael's return was not a first-class flight with champagne and welcoming smiles. It was a journey of shame and humiliation. Kicked off the yacht in Monaco with empty pockets, he and Jessica had to sell off their remaining jewelry and expensive watches to afford economy-class tickets back to the United States. The long, multi-hour flight felt like a century to him. He was crammed into a narrow seat, forced to eat bland airline food, surrounded by the ordinary people he had once disdained. The stark contrast between his recent paradise and this hell was excruciating. Jessica sat beside him, silent and stone-faced, just waiting for the first opportunity to escape the man who no longer had any value. As soon as they landed at JFK Airport, while he was still disoriented and exhausted from the long flight, another nightmare began. "There he is! That fraud CEO, Michael!" a voice shouted. Suddenly, a crowd of people swarmed from all directions surrounding him. They were creditors, suppliers, people who had heard the news of TG Group's bankruptcy and had been waiting at the airport for days to intercept him. "Pay up, you bastard! You owe me $100,000 for that last shipment. The company's bankrupt, so you better pay out of your own pocket. Don't you dare try to run. Get him, dishonest scum." They pushed and shoved, cursing him. Someone threw a rotten egg that splattered across his designer suit. He panicked, trying to cover his face and push his way out. Seeing the chaos, Jessica seized the opportunity, slipped into the crowd, and vanished. She had abandoned him without a second thought, just as he had planned to abandon me. Airport security had to struggle to rescue him from the furious mob. He was escorted to a security office, looking tattered and pathetic, a far cry from the imposing corporate chairman he once was. After being released, he didn't dare leave through the main exit. He had to call an old friend, the only one who still answered his calls, to pick him up on a beat-up scooter. He exited through a back door, sitting on the back of the scooter with a helmet pulled low and a mask covering his face, scurrying away like a criminal. He couldn't go home. The mansion was surely besieged by creditors. He couldn't go to his parents' house either, knowing it was no longer a peaceful sanctuary. The only place he could think of, the place where he clung to a fragile sliver of hope, was the TG Group headquarters. He still harbored the delusion that things weren't as bad as they seemed, that he could still salvage something. The scooter dropped him off on a street corner a short distance away. He walked toward the TG Group Tower, the skyscraper he had once proudly considered the symbol of his success. But as he looked up, he froze. The name of the building had been changed. The gleaming metal letters of TG Group Tower had been taken down. In their place, another set of letters, also metal but in a softer, more elegant font, shone brilliantly in the afternoon sun. Amelia Tower. Amelia Tower. The Tower of Amelia. He stood staring at the name, feeling as though 1,000 needles were piercing his heart. She hadn't just taken his money. She had taken everything. She had erased his name and replaced it with her own. It was an undeniable, ruthless declaration of ownership and victory. Just then, a group of people emerged from the building's grand lobby. Leading them was me, Amelia. I was no longer the simple housewife. I wore a powerful white pantsuit, my hair styled in an elegant updo that highlighted my intelligent forehead and sharp eyes. I exuded the confident, authoritative aura of a true leader. Following me was David, no longer an assistant but a distinguished chief operating officer. Flanking us was a team of bodyguards in black suits, their tall, imposing figures forming a protective barrier. As I walked, the heels of my shoes clicked against the marble floor, creating a sound that was crisp, decisive, and powerful. I saw him, huddled on the other side of the street, looking like a beggar. Our eyes met. His were filled with horror and devastation. Mine held no emotion, only the cold detachment of a queen looking down upon her vanquished foe. I deliberately slowed my pace, giving Michael enough time to see me clearly, to let my new image burn into his mind. I wanted him to see the woman he had abandoned, the woman he had deemed useless and parasitic, now standing in the very position he had coveted, radiating a power he could never hope to attain. He stood on the other side of the street, amidst the bustling traffic, an isolated island in a vast ocean, forgotten by the world. I, on the other hand, stood at the center of power, surrounded by loyalty and protection. The cruel contrast was the most devastating form of psychological torture for a man with an ego as large as his. I saw him stagger, as if to cross the street and rush towards me. Perhaps he wanted to scream, to question, to do something desperate, but my security team immediately noticed his intent. With just a glance from David, 2 bodyguards swiftly moved to the curb, forming an impenetrable human wall. Their cold, sharp gazes were a clear warning. Michael stopped. He knew he couldn't reach me. He no longer had any right to. He could only stand there, helplessly watching as I stepped into the waiting Maybach. Before getting in, I turned and gave him one last look. I said nothing, only offered the faintest smirk, a mysterious and powerful smile. The very same smile he had once seen on someone else, someone he had both admired and feared. But no, it wasn't someone else. It was the real me. The car pulled away, leaving behind a petrified Michael and a building that now bore a new name. Inside the car, David turned to me, his voice respectful. "Madam Chairman, everything is arranged. The press conference will take place at 3 p.m. today." "Good," I replied curtly, my gaze fixed forward. "Ensure every major media outlet is present. I want this story to be told far and wide. I didn't just want to reclaim what was mine. I wanted to turn the fall of TG Group into a lesson, a warning to all those who engage in deceitful business practices, who live by betrayal. I wanted the world to see that behind a man's success, there is sometimes the silent sacrifice of a woman, and when that woman decides to take back what is hers, any empire built on sand will crumble." Meanwhile, Michael, unable to reach me, tried to force his way into the building. He screamed, demanding to see his wife. He claimed it was his company. But he was met only by the cold indifference of the new security team. Following my orders, they used no violence. They simply blocked him, treating him like a deranged man causing a public disturbance. The helplessness and humiliation drove him mad. He began to smash things, shouting incoherently. Ultimately, the police were called, and he was taken to the station for disturbing the peace. A corporate chairman, now sitting in a holding cell at a local police precinct, There could be no more ironic end. News of the former TG Group chairman's arrest for disorderly conduct spread like wildfire, becoming a hot topic for the media just before my press conference. Everything was proceeding exactly according to the script I had written. All eyes were on Amelia Tower, awaiting the appearance of the main character, awaiting the answers to all the mysteries. They didn't know they were about to witness not just a press conference, but the most spectacular unmasking in the history of American business. At 3 p.m., the press conference room on the top floor of Amelia Tower was packed. Hundreds of journalists and reporters from every major news organization were present. Camera flashes went off incessantly, and the air was thick with anticipation. They were here not just to report on a business event, but to witness the drama, the secret palace intrigue of the ultra-rich. They were curious about the mysterious woman named Amelia, who had toppled an empire overnight. The doors opened. I, in my powerful chairman's attire, calmly walked onto the stage, followed by David and a team of top lawyers. I sat at the center table, facing hundreds of camera lenses without a trace of nervousness. A hush fell over the room. Everyone held their breath. I took my time, scanning the room before speaking. My voice, clear and strong, was amplified by the sound system. Welcome, members of the press, to today's conference. I am Amelia Thompson, chairwoman of the board of Phoenix Capital and the new owner of this building. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Phoenix Capital, the name of the mysterious benefactor, finally revealed, and its head was a young, beautiful woman whom they had only known as Michael's ex-wife. As you know, I continued, my voice steady, there have been many recent developments concerning TG Group, and I know you have many questions. I am here today to answer all of them. Instantly, a forest of hands shot up. One quick reporter asked the first question. Miss Thompson, are you the one who orchestrated the collapse of TG Group? What is the true nature of your relationship with Mr. Michael Sterling? Thank you for your question, I smiled. To answer that, perhaps we should start from the beginning, I signaled to David. The giant LED screen behind me lit up, displaying a series of documents. The trust fund's incorporation papers, legal documents proving my sole ownership, and the investment contracts Phoenix Capital had signed with TG Group 3 years prior. As you can see, I explained clearly, the entire capital used to build TG Group came from my investment fund. To be precise, TG Group was one of my investment projects. The room buzzed again. So Michael wasn't the founder, he was just an employee. Then why did you hide your identity all this time? Another journalist asked. Because I was once in love, I answered, my voice tinged with a distant sadness. I once believed that a woman could step back, sacrifice silently, and let her man shine, but I was wrong. My biggest mistake was not giving too much, but giving to the wrong person. Just then, the doors at the back of the room burst open. Michael, who had somehow escaped from the police station, stormed in. He looked pathetic, clothes disheveled, hair a mess, eyes bloodshot. "Amelia, you liar! You vicious woman!" he screamed, pointing a finger at me. "You deceived me! You stole everything from me!" Security guards immediately moved to restrain him, but I raised a hand, signaling them to stop. "Let him speak," I said, my voice chillingly calm. I looked directly into the eyes of the man, screaming in helpless fury. "Stole from you? Mr. Sterling, can I steal something that never belonged to you in the first place?" I signaled to David again. This time, the screen showed not dry contracts, but a series of photographs. Pictures of him and Jessica on the yacht, luxury shopping receipts, and bank statements showing how he had embezzled company funds to support his mistress. And finally, a video, recorded by a hidden camera in his penthouse, showing him and Jessica plotting to abandon me and seize my assets. Michael's face turned from red to ashen. He stood frozen, speechless. The entire room was silent, broken only by the continuous clicking of cameras. This company was mine from the very beginning. I stood up and walked towards him, my heels clicking on the floor like a judge's gavel. You were just a hired CEO, paid a very generous salary to execute plans that I laid out. I gave you so much money, fame, status, but you didn't appreciate it. You betrayed my trust. You trampled on my love. You threw it all away yourself. So don't blame me for being cruel. Blame yourself." I stopped right in front of him, looking deep into his eyes, which were now filled with fear and utter collapse. The play was over, and he had lost, miserably. After that bombshell press conference, Michael completely broke down. He had no energy left to scream, no arguments left to make. He was escorted out of the room by security, in silence, under the relentless flash of cameras and the pitying, contemptuous stares of hundreds. He wasn't taken back to the police station for disorderly conduct. With the evidence of embezzlement I had made public, he was taken directly to the Economic Crimes Investigation Unit. A future behind bars awaited him. But before facing legal punishment, he had to endure another kind of retribution, one from the person he had considered the true love of his life. Jessica, after her swift escape from the airport, hadn't fled immediately. That cunning fox was smart enough to know that the sinking ship named Michael still had some valuables worth salvaging. She didn't contact him. Instead, she quietly returned to the penthouse he had rented for her, a place she knew he kept his private stash. While Michael was struggling on the yacht and being mobbed at the airport, Jessica had ample time to execute her plan. Using her spare key, she opened his safe and cleaned out all the cash, foreign currency, and diamond jewelry he had hidden there. It was the money he had embezzled from the company, saved up for a new life with her after casting me aside. Now it had become the spoils of another betrayer. Not stopping there, Jessica called a few paparazzi contacts and sold them an exclusive tip, the location of Michael's penthouse and his likely movements. She did it not for the money, but for her own sweet revenge. She wanted the world to see that she, Jessica, was not the one being dumped, but the one who actively walked away from a terrible man. She wanted to paint herself as a victim, an innocent girl who had been deceived. Then, having taken everything she wanted, Jessica delivered the final, public blow. She posted a tearful status on her social media. "Goodbye to a mistaken love. It turns out I was being lied to all along. I hope no other girl has to go through what I did. It's all over now." That post, combined with the news of Michael's downfall, immediately captured public sympathy. People flooded her page with messages of comfort and support. From a despised mistress, she transformed into a pitiable victim. When Michael was finally released on bail after days of interrogation, the first thing he did was look for Jessica. He still held on to a sliver of hope that she still loved him, that she would be by his side during this difficult time. But when he arrived at the penthouse, he was greeted by a cold, empty apartment. All of Jessica's belongings were gone, along with all the money from the safe. He called her, but the calls went straight to voicemail. Then, he opened social media and saw her post, along with thousands of sympathetic comments. It was then that Michael truly understood. He hadn't just been betrayed by me, the wife he scorned. He had also been stabbed in the back by the mistress he had showered with gifts, the woman he planned to marry. He had lost everything for a gold digger, nothing more. He collapsed onto the floor of the empty room and began to laugh, a crazed, manic laugh at his own profound stupidity. The betrayer had finally tasted betrayal. That, perhaps, was the most bitter and ironic justice of all. After the press conference, I didn't allow myself a moment's rest. Overthrowing Michael was just the first step. Now I faced an even greater challenge, resurrecting the sunken ship of TG Group and turning it into a true empire, an empire bearing the mark of Amelia Thompson. I officially took over the company, not as a new owner, but returning to the position that was rightfully mine all along. Walking into Amelia Tower, I no longer felt like a stranger. This was where I belonged. My first order of business wasn't to review profit margins or unfinished projects. It was a major surgery, a thorough house cleaning. I knew that under Michael's 3-year reign, TG Group had ceased to be a meritocracy. It had become a family business in the worst sense, a place for Michael and his relatives to install cronies, hand out titles, and siphon off company assets. I called an emergency board meeting with all department heads. When I walked into the conference room, I was no longer an invisible ghost, but a tangible chairwoman. Everyone stood and bowed their heads. In their eyes, I saw not just respect, but also fear. They knew a new era had begun, and a purge was inevitable. Welcome everyone to TG Group, or rather, from now on it will be called Amelia Group, I said with a smile that held no warmth. Today, we are not here to discuss business strategy. We are here for something simpler, to clean house. I signaled to David. He projected the company's organizational chart onto the screen. But this chart was special. It included not just names and titles, but also a tangled web of family relationships. As you can see, I said, my voice cold, our company has a very interesting organizational structure. The head of human resources is Mr. Sterling's uncle. The deputy head of accounting is his cousin. The transportation team leader is his brother-in-law. And many, many other strategic positions are held by people with one thing in common. They are all relatives of the former CEO. The room was dead silent. Those whose names were on the chart turned pale. I have had the performance and qualification records of these individuals reviewed for the past year, I continued, flipping through a thick file. And the results are truly impressive. The HR department has consistently made poor hiring choices, creating a toxic environment of cronyism and infighting. The accounting department's books are murky, with many questionable expenses. The transportation team has an abnormally high rate of inventory loss. In short, not only are you incompetent, but you are also parasites, feasting on the very company that pays your salaries. I stopped and looked directly at the head of HR, Michael's uncle. Sir, could you tell me which university you graduated from and with what major that qualified you for this position? The man stammered, unable to speak. I knew very well he had barely finished high school. Or did you think that simply being the CEO's uncle gave you the right to manage hundreds of people? I didn't give him a chance to answer. I turned to David. David, read the resolution. David stood, his voice firm and clear. By order of Chairwoman Amelia Thompson, effective today, the employment contracts of the following individuals are terminated for failure to meet job requirements and for actions detrimental to the company's interests. A long list of nearly 20 names was read aloud, encompassing every relative Michael's family had installed. They were stunned, then began to protest. You can't do this. This is a personal vendetta. We've dedicated ourselves to this company. I cut them off. Security, I ordered. Please escort everyone who is no longer an employee of Amelia Group out of this conference room. Security officers quickly entered and removed the parasites, who left in a state of shock and powerlessness. After the trash had been taken out, I turned to those remaining in the room, the truly capable people who had been suppressed for so long. From today forward, Amelia Group will be a level playing field. Promotions will be based on merit, not connections. Good work will be rewarded, and poor performance will have consequences. I don't need sycophants. I need people who can help me rebuild this company from the ashes. Does anyone else wish to leave with them? The room was silent. Then one person, then two, and then the entire room rose to their feet and applauded. They weren't just applauding me. They were applauding a new future, a new hope for themselves. The cleaning was done. Now, it was time to rebuild. After the personnel overhaul, Amelia Group was infused with new life. The cliques were gone, as were the incompetent freeloaders. Everyone worked with a renewed sense of purpose and responsibility. Alongside David and the new leadership team, I worked tirelessly. We restructured the entire system, renegotiated with partners, and implemented new, transparent, and more effective business strategies. Slowly, the company began to show signs of recovery. The trust of investors and partners gradually returned. While I was busy rebuilding my empire, Michael was sinking to the depths of despair. Unemployed, abandoned by his mistress, and facing prison time, he had nothing left. He tried to find a new job, but with the stigma of being the CEO of the bankrupt TG Group, no company would touch him. He survived on the meager funds he had left and the pity of a few old friends. One evening, a heavy rain fell over New York City. I had just finished a late meeting and was on my way home. My Maybach pulled up to the gate of my mansion. Through the curtain of rain, under the pale yellow glow of a streetlight, I saw a figure huddled and soaked to the bone. The figure looked familiar. As I stepped out of the car, he recognized me. He staggered forward. It was Michael. He looked dreadful. His clothes were old and drenched, clinging to his gaunt frame. His once perfectly styled hair was now a wet, matted mess. His face was gaunt, covered in stubble. He bore no resemblance to the dashing chairman of the past. "Amelia," he called my name, his voice hoarse and lost in the sound of the rain. I stopped, looking at him coldly. "What are you doing here?" "Amelia, I beg you." Before he could finish, he dropped to his knees in front of me, right in a cold puddle of rainwater. He looked up at me, his bloodshot eyes streaming with tears. "I was wrong. I know I was wrong. Can you forgive me? Please, give me one more chance, just one last chance to make things right." He wept like a child, recounting the hardships he had endured, his belated remorse. He said he dreamt of me every night, dreamt of our happy days together. He said he realized that without me, he was nothing. I stood there, a large umbrella shielding me from the rain, while he knelt in the downpour, letting the cold water wash over his deceitful words. Was his plea sincere? Perhaps. When people lose everything, they tend to feel regret. But did that regret have any value anymore? Could it erase the wounds, the betrayals he had inflicted? No, absolutely not. I no longer felt hatred for him. I only felt pity. Pity for a weak and contemptible man. I looked down at him, the man who was once my entire world. "Get up, Michael," I said, my voice devoid of anger or forgiveness, only a cold tranquility. "It's cold and raining. Go home. Don't do these pointless things." "No, I won't go," he cried, still kneeling. "Not unless you forgive me. Amelia, I promise I'll change. I'll do anything to make it up to you. Can we get back together? I'll never hurt you again." "Get back together?" I laughed, a bitter sound that echoed in the rain. "Do you think a shattered mirror can be made whole again? Some mistakes can be forgiven, Michael, but some betrayals never can be. You didn't just betray my love. You betrayed my sacrifice, my trust. You killed that love yourself. It can never be revived." I didn't want to waste any more time. I turned to walk towards the gate, but he grabbed the hem of my coat. "Amelia, don't go. Please, just give me a job. A janitor, a security guard, anything. I just want to be near you, to see you every day." "Let go," I said, my voice hardening, my last shred of patience gone. Seeing my resolve, he let go in despair. I walked through the gate without a backward glance. The heavy iron gate slowly swung shut, creating an insurmountable distance between our two worlds. He remained kneeling in the rain, his head bowed to the ground, his sobs mingling with the falling drops. A tragic scene, but its sole audience, me, was no longer moved. Michael's plea in the rain didn't soften my heart, but it was a sign that he had truly hit rock bottom. And when people are desperate, they can do desperate things. I increased my personal security, but I never imagined the next attack would not be aimed at me, but at his own parents. Retribution, sometimes, comes not from the victim, but from the loved ones of the perpetrator. After the collapse of TG Group and Michael, his mother Susan could not accept reality. From a chairman's wife living in luxury, she suddenly became the wife of a failure and the mother of a criminal. She had no money for spas or for showing off to her friends. She faced the scornful looks of her neighbors and whispers behind her back. The bitterness and loss drove her mad, and she unleashed all her fury on her husband, Michael's father. "It's all your fault, you useless man. You couldn't make anything of yourself, and you couldn't even raise your son right," she berated him daily. He, a man accustomed to a quiet life, now had to endure his wife's nagging and the shame brought by his son. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, turning their once peaceful home into a living hell. They fought constantly. Then, one day, unable to take it anymore, Susan did something drastic. She gathered all her remaining jewelry and money and left. Without a word of goodbye, she abandoned her elderly husband and the mountain of debt her son had created to find a new life, reportedly with another man. Michael's father, left alone, had to face his son's creditors. Unable to find Michael in the city, they tracked him down to his small hometown. They showed up at his house, threatening and pressuring him. With no other choice, to preserve the last shred of family honor, he had to do the most painful thing: sell the ancestral home and land. It was their only asset, the last pride of their lineage. On the day of the sale, he cried. The tears of a man who had been strong his whole life, now broken by his son's mistakes. He had to move into a small rented room, living in solitude, tormented by the blame of his relatives. "It's your fault for spoiling him. Now he's ruined the whole family. Selling the ancestral home to pay the debts of a convict. What a disgrace." Those words were sharper than any knife. From a respected man in the village, he became an outcast, unable to look anyone in the eye. I heard these stories through David, and my feelings were complex. I felt no joy, but I also felt no pity. It was the price they had to pay. Susan paid for her greed and snobbery. Michael's father paid for his indulgence and failure to properly guide his son. They had once joined their son in scorning and humiliating me. They had once been proud of an empire built on lies. Now that the empire had fallen, they were buried with it. It was the impartial law of karma. Cruel, perhaps, but justice had been served not only to the perpetrator, but to those who had enabled his crimes. After stabilizing the company and my life, I had the time and peace of mind to take one final step, a legal maneuver, to officially close this chapter and seek complete justice. I could have let it go, let Michael self-destruct with the consequences he had created, but I didn't. Not out of revenge, but because I realized this was no longer just my personal story. It was a story about a type of crime, a sophisticated crime cloaked in the guise of love and marriage. If I remained silent, there might be other women, other Amelias, who would fall victim to other Michaels in the future. I instructed my legal team to gather all the evidence of Michael's embezzlement of company funds to support his mistress. The evidence included not only the bank statements I already had, but was further substantiated by the testimony of accountants, shopping receipts, and lease agreements that Michael had paid for Jessica using company money. The total amount was substantial, enough to constitute a felony. I officially filed a criminal complaint against Michael with the police for misappropriation of assets. This was no longer a civil divorce case, it was a criminal matter. When he received the summons from the investigators, Michael, who was barely scraping by, completely fell apart. He probably thought that after he had lost everything, I would let him be. He never imagined I would deliver a final, decisive blow that could send him to prison. He tried every way to contact me, calling, texting, even showing up at my company's gates to beg. "Amelia, please, don't do this. If you send me to prison, who will take care of my father? Do you want to destroy my entire family?" He was using his family as a shield again, trying to evoke my pity. But I was no longer the weak girl of the past. I didn't answer, didn't meet him. I let my lawyers handle it. The case was quickly prosecuted. Faced with irrefutable evidence, Michael had no way to deny the charges. He bowed his head and confessed to everything. The trial took place shortly after. I was not present. I had no desire to see his pathetic state again. I followed the outcome through my lawyer. In the end, the court delivered a just verdict. Michael was sentenced to several years in prison for misappropriation of a large sum of assets. The sentence was not just punishment for his embezzlement. It was a warning to all who would exploit trust and affection for personal gain. It affirmed that while the law may have loopholes, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. Sooner or later, every wrongdoing has its price. For me, this legal victory was not about revenge. It was a necessary action to clean up the business environment and protect those who operate with integrity. More importantly, it was a message to all women. Always protect your assets and the fruits of your labor with legal knowledge. Love is not a reason to turn a blind eye to wrongdoing, because when you tolerate a small evil, you unwittingly create the conditions for a greater evil to grow. Time passed. The turbulent waves of the past gradually subsided, becoming mere ripples in my memory. My life returned to a rhythm of work, success, and a sense of peace that had been won at the cost of my painful youth. The names Michael Sterling and TG Group seemed to have been forgotten, reduced to a cautionary tale, a classic lesson in betrayal occasionally recounted over drinks in business circles. I, too, tried not to dwell on them, actively pushing any related information out of my life. But life sometimes has ironic twists, unexpected encounters that force us to face the people and stories we wish to bury forever. A few years later, After Michael had served his sentence, I heard whispers that he was no longer in the city. He had vanished. No one knew where he went or what he was doing. I didn't care. To me, he had died the day I walked away from his life. Then, one winter evening, I had to entertain an important partner from Japan at a chic rooftop bar in a 5-star hotel. It wasn't my usual kind of place. I preferred quiet, cozy spaces over loud, ostentatious ones. But for the sake of business and respect for my partner, I couldn't refuse. While I was waiting for my guest in a private, Japanese-style VIP room, a server entered. He wore a neat uniform, a white shirt and black trousers, and carried a tray of premium sake. "Your sake, ma'am," he said. That voice. It was achingly familiar. A voice that had once whispered words of love in my ear. The same voice that had screamed insults at me during our separation. I looked up, and my heart skipped a beat. The server, despite the crisp uniform and his attempt to keep his head bowed low, couldn't hide his gaunt face, the sunken eyes, or the premature gray hair at his temples. It was Michael. He recognized me at the same moment. As our eyes met, the world seemed to stop. I saw the confusion, the shame, and the profound humiliation in his gaze. The tray in his hands trembled, the porcelain sake cups clinking against each other, a jarring sound in the quiet room. He quickly averted his eyes, intending to set down the tray and disappear like a ghost. But I spoke. "Wait." My voice was calm, devoid of emotion. No anger, no sarcasm, just a chilling stillness. He froze, his back rigid. He didn't dare look up. "Look at me," I said. He hesitated, probably torn between fleeing and facing me. Finally, he slowly raised his head. He couldn't meet my eyes directly. His gaze darted to a random corner of the room. "It's been a long time," I said, a neutral social pleasantry, as if speaking to an old acquaintance. Hi, Amelia," he stammered, his voice hoarse and faint. You work here?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. I wanted to hear him admit his failure. "Yes, I just started a few months ago," he replied, his voice thick with shame and self-loathing. "Is the work good?" It's okay. It pays the bills." The air grew heavy with an unbearable awkwardness. I didn't know what else to say, and neither did he. He just stood there, wringing his hands, a sinner awaiting judgment from the judge of his life. "Are you doing well?" He finally managed to ask, a question that had likely been weighing on his mind for a long time. "I am well. Very well," I replied, emphasizing the words. "Thank you for asking." Silence fell again. I looked at him, the man who was once my husband, my entire world. Now he stood before me in a pathetic state, serving drinks to the ex-wife he had cast aside. Life's irony is sometimes more potent than any calculated revenge. "I'm sorry, Amelia," he said suddenly. This time, he looked directly into my eyes, and in them, I no longer saw the deceit, the calculation, or the arrogance of the past. There was only genuine remorse, a late, painful remorse. "I know nothing I say now matters, that it can't change anything, but I am truly sorry. For everything, for betraying you, for being so stupid and selfish, for destroying everything with my own hands. I've paid the price." "Yes, you have," I nodded, a slight, gentle gesture. "You've paid your price, and I've built my own life. It's all in the past now, Michael. I no longer hold any resentment towards you. I just hope you live the rest of your life well. Live an honest life. That's the best way to atone for your mistakes, not to me, but to yourself." With that, I gestured for him to leave. The conversation was over. He nodded, saying nothing more. He bowed, a deep bow of respect that I had never received during all our years of marriage. Then he quietly left the room, his back stooped with exhaustion and loneliness. Watching his figure disappear behind the door, a complex emotion washed over me. There was no victor's satisfaction, no pity for the vanquished. There was only a quiet sorrow for a life that had been self-destructed, for a man who had paid too high a price for his irredeemable mistakes. That chance encounter was the final, definitive end to our story. From that moment on, all debts, all resentments, truly dissipated into thin air, leaving my soul with a complete and lasting peace. The past however painful, was finally laid to rest. The chance encounter with Michael was like a passing breeze, the final somber note in the tragic symphony of my past. It stirred a brief wave of sympathy, a moment of reflection on the transience of life, and then it was gone, leaving no echo. The past was truly behind me, like a film that had rolled its final credits, with no possibility of a rewind or a sequel. My life now was a completely new composition, filled with notes of success, peace, and simple joys I had long forgotten. Under my leadership, Amelia Group not only made a spectacular recovery from the chaos Michael left behind, but also grew exponentially, becoming one of the leading multi-sector investment corporations in the country, a formidable force in the business world. I steered the company away from the risky and exhausting path of real estate speculation that Michael had pursued, a path that offered only short-term gains and long-term instability. With the vision and experience I had accumulated as a silent investor, I set a new, more sustainable, and more humane course. We focused our investments on 3 key areas I believed were the future: clean technology, organic agriculture, and education. I wanted to use my vast resources not to build more soulless skyscrapers, but to create real value for society, to plant seeds for the future. We sought out and funded startups developing next-generation solar panels and advanced wastewater treatment systems. We invested in chemical-free farms, building a clean food supply chain from farm to table, hoping to bring safe meals to every American family. My most passionate project, the one to which I devoted the most time and energy, was the establishment of a chain of non-profit international schools called Wings of Dreams. These schools were dedicated to underprivileged but academically gifted children, providing them with a top-tier education completely free of charge. The name Amelia Thompson was no longer associated only with a cold, sharp-witted business tycoon who had brought down her ex-husband. I became known as a philanthropist, a woman with a kind heart who used her talent and fortune to inspire others, to change lives, and to build a better future. But my greatest success was not the massive profits on financial statements, nor the accolades from the media. My greatest success was living a life I truly wanted, a life of fulfillment and freedom. I was no longer a silent investor hiding my abilities to protect a man's fragile ego. I was no longer a dutiful housewife living by her husband's moods, suppressing her own dreams. I was myself, free, independent, and whole. I learned balance, something I had never achieved before. By day, I was a decisive chairwoman in luxurious boardrooms, making billion-dollar decisions. But when I returned home, I was an ordinary woman. I enjoyed cooking for my family and close friends. I loved spending weekend afternoons reading a good book in my small orchid garden or attending a classical concert with friends. I rediscovered the simple pleasures, the genuine emotions that money could not buy. I didn't rush into a new romance. The wounds from my first marriage, the pain of betrayal, had taught me a profound lesson about caution and the value of independence. But I didn't close off my heart either. I didn't chop down the whole forest because of one rotten tree. I believed that after the storm, the sun would shine again. I believed that happiness was waiting for me around a corner, if only I was patient and wise enough to recognize it. And then, on a business trip to Oregon to survey a high-tech agricultural project, I met him. He was not a wealthy businessman or a high-status figure. He was an architect, an artist at heart who loved nature and lived a simple, quiet life. He ran a small design firm specializing in green architecture, in wooden houses that blended seamlessly with their natural surroundings. We met in a small coffee shop tucked away on a hillside amidst a whispering pine forest. We talked for hours, not about multi-billion-dollar deals or business strategies, but about books, about the classic folk music of Bob Dylan, about the simple dream of living a peaceful life away from the hustle and bustle. With him, I felt a strange sense of peace. He wasn't dazzled by my status or my immense wealth. He saw me, my soul. He said he admired my strength and intellect, but he loved even more the vulnerabilities, the hidden corners, the scars I tried to hide behind the facade of a powerful woman. He was the first person in many years who made me feel safe enough to take off my heavy mask, to be true to my feelings, to be soft without fear of being judged or exploited. Our love came gently, as naturally as a summer rain shower, nourishing my parched soul. He didn't promise to give me a more luxurious material life. He knew I neither needed nor wanted that. He only promised to give me a home, a true sanctuary where I would never have to pretend, never have to act, a place where I could peacefully be myself. And he did. My new life was no longer just about success and career. It was also about love, a true love built on a foundation of understanding, sharing, and deep respect. 2 years later, we had a small, intimate wedding on a hill in Oregon, in the simple wooden house he had designed and built with his own hands. There was no extravagance, no hundreds of guests or elaborate ceremonies, no media presence. Only our families and closest friends, the ones who had walked with me through the stormiest days. I wore a simple white silk dress, no elaborate jewelry, and held his hand as we stood surrounded by the vastness of the sky, the sighing pines, and the scent of wild flowers. As we exchanged rings, he looked deep into my eyes, his warm, sincere voice echoing in the quiet air. "Thank you for trusting me, Amelia. Thank you for giving me the chance to prove that there are still men in this world who will love you, for your soul, and not for anything else. I can't promise you the world, but I promise that my world will always be you." Tears fell from my eyes, but they were tears of pure, complete happiness, of total healing. We didn't move back to the clamor of New York. I decided to delegate most of the operational management of Amelia Group to David, my loyal and talented partner who had proven his capabilities over many years. I retained my role as chairwoman of the board, managing remotely and only participating in major strategic decisions. I wanted to spend more time with my small family, with the man who had given me a peace no fortune could buy. We lived in our wooden house in Oregon, a simple, secluded life compared to the corporate world, but more fulfilling than any luxury I had ever known. We woke up not to a blaring alarm clock, but to the sound of birds singing. We would make a pot of hot tea and sit on the porch, watching the morning mist dissolve over the green pines. During the day, he was busy with his architectural drawings, while I worked online or read my favorite books in our small library. In the afternoons, we would take walks in the forest or tend to our small garden of roses and organic vegetables. My life was no longer about dancing profit margins, stressful boardroom battles, or cautious calculations. It was about small, simple joys. The joy of harvesting vegetables I had grown myself for dinner. The joy of cooking a delicious meal with him, even if it was simple country fare. The joy of sitting by a warm fireplace on a winter night, listening to him talk about his new architectural ideas, about the lands he had traveled. I had found true happiness, not at the pinnacle of fame, but in the quiet, peaceful moments of everyday life. Occasionally, I would still come across news about Michael. After his release from prison for other economic crimes, he was unable to return to a normal life. His father had passed away from illness after a long period of decline brought on by his son's actions. His mother had disappeared, her whereabouts unknown. He lived a transient life, homeless and alone, mired in guilt and alcoholism. I felt nothing when I read these updates. He had become a complete stranger, an expensive lesson in betrayal and the price of wrong choices. He had buried his own life. One morning, as I was reading on the porch, David called, his voice full of excitement, reporting on a successful charity project funded by our Wings of Dreams Foundation. "Madam Chairman, we've finished building the school for the children in the rural Appalachian community. The kids and the locals are overjoyed. They send their deepest thanks to you." Hearing the news warmed my heart. I realized the true value of money lies not in what you can buy for yourself, but in how many people you can help, how many good values you can spread. I had transformed my vast fortune into schools, shelters, and smiles. That was the most profitable investment of all, an investment in the future, in the next generation. I hung up and looked out at the garden. I saw him, my husband, diligently tending to a newly planted rose bush. He looked up, saw me, and smiled. A gentle, warm smile, without a hint of calculation. I smiled back. I once thought I had to be a silent investor, hiding my true self to earn love, but I was wrong. True happiness doesn't require hiding or pretending. It comes when you can be yourself, loved for who you are, with all your strengths and all your scars. Never underestimate a woman's silence. Behind it may be a breaking heart, but there may also be an extraordinary strength, a sharp intellect waiting for its moment to awaken. And when that strength rises, it can change the world and find the brightest dawn for its own life. I have found my dawn. And I wish for all the women out there, those who have been, are, or will go through storms, that you too will find your own brilliant sunrise.